Sometimes the smallest act of kindness, the simplest moment of love, can change a life forever. These are 3 true stories that prove that even in the darkest times, a little light can make all the difference. Story 1. The quarter that came back after a lifetime. It was the Great Depression. A little boy named Howard was walking home, hungry, with just a single quarter in his pocket, the last bit of money he had. Then, he saw a man, sitting on the curb, holding a stack of newspapers that no one was buying. His clothes were torn, his eyes sunken. But what Howard noticed most was the way the man stared at the ground, like he had given up on life. Howard hesitated. That quarter was his only chance to eat that day, but something inside him ached. Without a word, he stepped forward and held out the coin. The man looked up, his hands shaking. "Are you sure, kid?" he whispered. Howard nodded. The man took the coin, eyes filling with tears. "You have no idea how much this means to me," he said. Years passed. Howard grew up, started his own business. But life wasn't always kind. His company hit rock bottom, on the verge of collapse. He sat in his office staring at a pile of unpaid bills, knowing he had nothing left. Then, a miracle. A mysterious investor stepped in, saving his company when no one else would. Howard met the man, shaking his hand, confused. "Why?" he asked. The investor smiled. "Because when I was a young man, a little boy gave me his last quarter. That moment changed my life forever. I never forgot it. And now, it's my turn to help you." It was him, the man from the curb. The stranger Howard had helped as a child. Howard never thought much about that quarter after that day. But kindness has a way of coming back, even after a lifetime. Story 2. The bus driver who saw the invisible girl. It was a cold, empty night in New York. The streets were quiet. The bus was nearly empty. And William, a tired bus driver, was finishing his shift. That's when he saw her. A young woman sitting alone at a bus stop, her shoulders shaking, her head down, hands gripping her coat like she was trying to hold herself together. Something inside William told him to stop. He opened the doors and said softly, "Need a ride?" She looked up. Her eyes were red, her face streaked with silent tears, but she said nothing. William didn't ask questions, he just nodded. "Come on in, ride as long as you want, no charge." She stepped onto the bus, sat in the back. For over an hour they drove in silence. Stopping when she wanted to stop, waiting when she needed to sit still. No rush, no pressure, just a safe place. Finally she stood up. As she stepped off the bus, she turned to him, voice barely above a whisper, "Thank you." Then she was gone. Weeks later a letter arrived at the bus station. No return address, just a handwritten note. "Dear bus driver, that night I was planning to end my life. I felt invisible, like no one would care if I was gone, but then you stopped, and you let me ride, and for the first time in so long I felt like I mattered. I'm getting help now. I just wanted you to know, you saved me. Thank you." William never saw her again, but he never stopped looking at the empty bus seat where she once sat, hoping she was somewhere out there, living. Story 3. The grandpa who loved even when she forgot. Every day, without fail, John walked into the nursing home, holding a small bouquet of daisies. Every day he sat beside the same hospital bed, holding the same frail hand, whispering the same words, "I love you, my darling." And every day, she looked at him with empty eyes. She didn't know his name. She didn't remember their wedding day, the house they built, the children they raised. The disease had stolen all of that from her. But John still came. One of the nurses once asked him, "Why do you keep coming, Mr. John? She doesn't remember you." John just smiled. "Because I remember her." Day after day he told her stories of their life, even if she no longer knew it was hers. Then one day, as he placed the daisies beside her, something happened. Her hand, so weak, so fragile, squeezed his. And in a whisper, barely a breath, she said his name. John. For the first time in years, she remembered. Tears streamed down his face as he kissed her forehead, holding on to that moment like it was the most precious thing in the world. Because it was. And when she passed away that night, he didn't cry because he lost her. He smiled, because for one last time, she found him. Sometimes we think kindness is just a small thing, a quarter, a bus ride, a bouquet of daisies. But kindness is never small, love is never wasted, and even when the world forgets, love remembers. If this touched your heart, share it with someone who needs a little hope today, and remember, Even the smallest kindness can change a life forever. Credits: narration by narrator's name, written by writer's name, produced by producer's name.